names on the side. What? We don't have our names on the side. So this is the web and internet transport meeting, the IETF WITAREA. We are in Montreal. I think it's November 2025. And I'm Gori. I'm one of the ADs, and this is
Mike Bishop, the other WIT AD.
And we welcome you to this meeting. We have an agenda. The agenda is generic. It looks like this. Well, that's because the slide is generic. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we should fix the mistakes as well. Okay, well, no, don't minute that. Fine. This is what we plan to do. There's an open mic at the end, and there will be time to discuss things if you have anything you think might be useful to bring up or note, apart from the agenda slide, which we've already noted. Aha. Do you want to do this, or would you like me to?
So I'm sure at this point you have seen the note well several times through the week, but it is important. So please review it. These are the this is a reminder of the terms and policies under which you participate at the IETF. If you do not agree to these, then please do not participate. Okay.
This, I'll do some, you do some. This is the composition of the WITAREA. We have 18 working groups divided between Mike and I. We're both willing to help, and if you have any questions in any of these working groups, but please speak to the responsible AD if you can, because it helps coordinating with the working group. We have 2 directorates. One is an area review team. We'll talk about those later. We have obviously 2 ADs. This time we have 0 BOFs. We don't have any birds of a feather meeting. If you're interested in forming a working group or starting a BOF activity, please speak to us as soon as you have the idea, so we have plenty of warning and can help prepare the process. So we're welcome to new BOFs, should anyone think there is a need or a useful activity that we should put into a BOF.
So since the last IETF, we've had 6 new RFCs. And for the things that haven't reached RFC yet, we will be looking through and reviewing the status of those documents by responsible AD. So,
okay, so this is a list of working groups for which I'm the responsible AD. I've added a few stars just to make the slide slightly more exciting, because I've been attempting to go through my working groups and, where possible, update the charter to bring it in line with what's currently going on. And we have charters at various stages of progression, just trying to keep these in line with what we're actually doing rather than what we did when we chartered the working group. I think this is a fun set of working groups, and if you recognize anything here that you're not actually following, please have a look at other working groups to see what documents are active. Next slide. They're doing work. We try as best we can to clear the documents through our pipeline. The pipeline is, of course, that they go to a working group last call, then an IETF last call, and we have one document that's in that IETF last call processing from AVT Core. They then go to IESG evaluation and will appear on a telechat with a ballot finally, where all the ADs get a chance to look at the document, go through a checklist, read it, and might want to discuss it with people. And finally, they move to the approved status, from which they will eventually go to the RFC editor, usually in a matter of days, sometimes weeks. That's my pipeline. And these are ones that have passed through the IESG and are now with the RFC editor in their queue for publication. The bottom one just being a note that Even though we are an AD, we don't get to run the process for our own documents. So Mike is running the process for the Careful Resume document for which I was an editor.
And by a similar note, I'm the responsible AD for these working groups. I did not put on stars to make it more exciting, but HTTP has had a charter update since the last meeting. And MASC is beginning that process. See their working group meeting for more discussion of that. And WebBotAuth is new and has had a charter since the last meeting and may have yet another charter before the next one. We'll get into that in a moment. As for my pipeline, we have a couple things in last call. The Ojai one is in a somewhat special state because that is a security area working group that I'm the responsible ID for. So it shows up on my reports. We've got a couple going through ISG evaluation now, and we have some that are hanging out waiting for final processing before the RFC editor gets them. Got a couple that are in the RFC editor queue, and this area has done good work on getting all of these ready. So we have no BOFs at this IETF. Talking about our review teams, I think we have transport first.
I could talk about transport, but I think Magnus should do it since he's the man who's responsible for making all the things happen.
Oh, appropriately high mic. Thank you. Yes, so the transport area review team, I'm one of the two secretaries in it. The other one is Wes Eddy. We review drafts with potential transport protocol related challenges in IETF last call and on request from chairs, etc. that wants an early review. And ADs, of course. They also can request reviews. So in the last 3 months, basically since Madrid, we have reviewed 19 documents. This is the people who have done it and how many documents they done. So it's 1 to 2 documents. And Gory is on the team, but he's excused while he's an AD. So so it's a large thank you from me and I guess the ADs for all the good work the viewers does. And as you see, it's not an unreasonable load here, 1 to 2 documents per meeting cycle, basically. So if you go back to the first slide. And I want to say early reviews, they are good because we feel less if you have some comments on etc., you can expect things to be much easier to fix before people get far too entrenched in their ideas about how things are, etc. If they know you need to fix this, you're going to have to do some things to address these, etc., and maybe have to do some changes to their protocol proposals. It's good to find this early for everyone. So please request, if your work group share somewhere, do request reviews. And I do see it as a positive development. And another thing which we, compared to some other review teams, as the secretary, we actually try to match our reviewers' skill sets against documents for best possible outcome. And so we do have room for some more reviewers. We actually have finalized one more reviewer. I mean, working on seeing some others, but we could take on some more reviewers that can contribute. So if you want to be interested in being a reviewer, send a mail to tsbtriage@itf.org. Also, if you're interested in saying we have a wiki with some common issues, I didn't check the link. I hope it still works. But yeah, it's if you want to see what we normally kind of things we on the high level try to find, but people have experience, etc., in certain areas and can go much more deeper into certain things. So yeah, I think that's what I have.
Okay, thank you, Magnus. And this is a really valuable service. Please use it. Please join it. And yes, the link does work of all the issues. Please look at the slide deck if you're interested.
So by a similar token, we have an HTTP directorate that provides reviews for HTTP related issues across the IETF. Do you want to say a word about that, or shall I?
Oh dear. That's better. Yeah, so we have an HTTP directorate. It's getting more active. We seem to have a fairly constant stream of documents across the IETF. You know, both extensions to HTTP and also especially applications or even lower layer constructs using HTTP. It slices, it dices. It's a relatively small number of people, and that's because it having people who are deeply familiar across the entire HTTP stack is still relatively rare, and especially when one of them becomes an area director, our capacity to review is reduced. So we're always looking for folks to help out. But yeah, it's thank you to the reviewers. I feel bad every time I press the button, but I'll still press the button.
So I will add two things to that. First off, that as I'm going through the NomCom process this cycle, I was helping to interview people who are potential new ADs. One of the things that comes up is developing the talent pipeline. And something that contributes to that is serving on review teams and directorates, because it exposes you to the kind of cross-area in-depth review that the IESG is doing when things get to that stage. So if you're looking for a way to step up and maybe get into IETF leadership, any of these are worthwhile opportunities to look at. I also, just on a more humorous note, will note that I forgot to take myself off the cycle of the HTTP directorate. And so I had a document that came to IESG review, and I saw that it had some HTTP issues and really should have had a directorate review before it went to the balloting process. And who was the assigned reviewer for that? Oh, I was the assigned HTTP directorate reviewer. That's why it never happened until it got to the ISG. So please, I need a replacement on the directorate. So we are trying to highlight some working groups around the WIT area with each of these meetings. And so I believe the first one that we're looking at today is HAPI. So do we have somebody speaking to that? All right. I will get the slides up. HAPI update, confirm. And
Clicker me.
there.
How's that? Cool. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the HAPI Working Group. For those of you who have been in the room, some of this will hopefully be review. For those who haven't been in the room or been following along on the mailing list, please do come join. It's a fun bunch. The previous version of Happy Eyeballs was Happy Eyeballs version 2. It was published in 2017, and a few things have happened since then. And so we're now working on a Happy Eyeballs version 3. There's some additional bits and pieces we should talk about for what are we actually trying to do here, though. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that when a client connects to a server through a variety of other intermediaries, most likely, that the connection that is used is the best one for the user. And up until Happy Eyeballs version 2, that was mostly around, do we use IPv4 or do we use IPv6? And the idea was that we were willing to be a little bit slower about connecting over IPv6 because we thought that once you had a connection over v6, you'd have a better day going forward. The rest of that connection's life would probably work out better for you. You would have fewer NATs and other things that could potentially time out or otherwise have issues. And so we thought that we would potentially take a slight hit in the connection establishment phase in order to gain a better experience overall. What that turns out to be in terms of working group charter and the places we're trying to limit some scope is we're saying that we are working on making sure that you can have connection establishment to a single host name that results in a single connection to a server that best serves the user over time. And that might entail multiple different connection attempts. You might have tried racing both v4 and v6. We'll talk about some of the other new things that we're going to be racing in a second. But at the end of it, we want to come away with a connection to a server, not connections across many different interfaces and paths and all that kind of stuff. That's out of scope for now, and we can talk about that once we're done with this work. There's a few new things that have happened. v6 only networks are far more widespread now than they were before, which is pretty cool. That means it's working. We're totally going to get there one of these days. There's also a lot more IPv6 mostly networks and kind of other smart ways to make v6 and v6 only work in more places. And so we want to make sure that we're correctly representing the variety of different options that are available to endpoints when they want to make connections. There's also this small protocol called Quick that's doing a few things around here. We have a whole variety of different ways to discover that. One of those things is HTTPS records, or more generally SVCB and DNS. And so when you have information about different alternative places and protocols that you could go, you're no longer just racing between IPv4 and IPv6, but you could potentially explode that combinatorially to racing v4 with Quick and v4 with TLS. And how do you grapple with that and reason about it? And then you make it a little more complicated by throwing in something like ECH, where now you have a security or a privacy consideration. So it's not just, I want Quick because I want things to be faster for users. It's also, I want ECH because I want things to be more private. And if I race ECH and non-ECH, I'm still telling people exactly what I'm doing with the non-ECH attempt at the same time. So you have to be a little bit more careful about what you're willing to just throw out there and see what comes back. Brief overview here of just kind of the flow of how this works, especially if this is interesting. If any of these things pique your interest, please do come chat about them. We're talking about pretty much every one of these boxes. We start by resolving DNS. A big piece of that is being able to do that asynchronously. So the idea isn't you say, hey, go resolve this name, and then you twiddle your thumbs for a while. And then at the end, you get this whole list of your menu of options for where to connect. But we're actually expecting people to be able to tell when records come back in different orders. Sometimes you'll see that like an A record will come back before quad A, sometimes vice versa. You want to be able to handle that really well and not wait for everything to come back just to start connecting. Once we do that, we have a new step, which we've been so far calling grouping, which is where we essentially take different priorities of what we think is super important. Something like ECH would fall into this bucket of I'm going to try all of the things for which I have an ECH config and can be super private before I try any of the things that are not private. And if I'm essentially feeling closed, I might never try those things that are not private. Then we sort. SVCB comes with some cool prioritization options. So when you operate your server or your intermediary, you have a whole pile of different options for how you can instruct us to go different places, weights you can give to things. You can give us backups of like, hey, if this continent burns, then please go to this other continent. Some really cool stuff that can happen there. And then at the end, we do the kind of traditional Happy Eyeballs v2 style attempt racing, just now with a much more complicated structure of what's getting raced. For each of these things, we have a couple of things that are substantially different. I'm going to go through them pretty fast. When you're resolving DNS, you now get to talk about SVCB. You can prefer things like ECH. You might prefer certain ALPNs. We're having a lot of really good debate about, should I always prefer Quick? Should I only prefer Quick if you told me to prefer Quick? Would I be willing to be told that you don't think Quick is better, but I think it's better, and now who gets to say and why do I choose and what do I do? Similarly, for sorting, we follow SVCB priorities, but you'll notice in the prior step, we might not have followed those priorities. So we got some really interesting discussion about when do you follow those and when do you not and who gets to say. And the other big difference, which you might notice, is we historically used to race these different connection attempts up through something like the TCP handshake being complete. And then you would only do one TLS handshake. And we now are racing up through the entire TLS handshake, which happens to work very conveniently for Quick because there is no separation between transport and security handshakes. That brings us back to our kind of overall flow here. We have a bunch of interesting things that are kind of places where we have uncertainty or where we have a variety of opinions that we're trying to kind of tussle with the different meaning of what if we prioritize this versus the other thing. So if any of these things are interesting, please do check in on the list and come hang out with us. One of them is, what do I do if I'm synthesizing a v6 address? Do I prioritize that like I would a v4 address? Because I know it's kind of actually going over v4, but it looks like v6. Exactly how do I prioritize some of the grouping and sorting, especially around, do I respect what the server asked for? Do I respect what the client thought it wanted when it came in? How do I handle when a network changes partway through some of this? Can I cache historical data across network changes, stuff like that? There's a whole very interesting space that we're going to talk about a little bit this week around optimistic DNS, which is where you might choose to ignore the TTL on a expired and stale answer to get a race started while simultaneously requesting fresh answers and updating with them as you go. That's something that has, I know we've talked about in a variety of different venues around the IETF and elsewhere for a while. So this is a spot to chat about that a little bit. And then there's a whole nother section, which I have a whole nother slide for, around error reporting. So on one hand, making connections work for the user really helps the user, and that is our top priority here. At the same time, it might also hide some places where if v6 is broken in your network and we're always falling back to v4, you might never notice that your network is broken because nobody's telling you about it because everything worked great for them. So there's a core ask that we would like to be able to tell the network or the destination that it's broken. At the same time, that presents a wide variety of privacy challenges. So we would very much like, we've got some people who are putting in some really good work to come up with very different and creative ideas for how we could solve some of this in a privacy sensitive way. And we would like you to help fill in your ideas on this slide, please. With that, we've got a couple of fun talks this time. One of them is going through basically that whole list of discussions, which is the top one on kind of the main draft that covers all of this. We've also got some cool stuff we're going to talk about for how we gather metrics and use slightly more data-driven approaches to picking some of the recommended constants and timeouts and things like that that are in the draft. And then there's some really cool work on how do we actually test if this is working and what do we see and how does it go, that has been super well received so far. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And that is all happening tomorrow at that spot in the map.
I think probably Eric could help answer questions, or at least find who could answer them. So if you have any questions, please come to the mic or join the list. While I was at the RIPE meeting remotely, there was a lot of enthusiasm from the operators to say, wow, does that mean we actually figure out what's broken in our network because you tell us something? And that's a very interesting thing from the endpoint communicating back to the network to say something's broken. I mean, is that within the scope of what Happy might do? And what sort of messages might we send?
That is very much in scope. It also, that scope comes with the large privacy asterisk. So it is definitely a thing that might be done if we can find a way to do it safely. We've talked about a bunch of different stuff. I know we were talking about some interesting ICMP directions very recently. We were talking about some syslog style stuff. I think it's going to be a combination of what is fit for purpose and what is implementation possible for people who live at different layers of the stack. This is a somewhat unique working group in our ability to touch on all of the different areas from all of the technologies. And so we've got a very nice group of folks who are all coming from very different backgrounds and very different worldviews, figuring out how to talk the same language. So yes, might be done. We have at least some ideas for how to do it. And there's a couple of folks who've been really putting in a lot of time to make that go, which is really appreciated. And at the same time, we still got to make sure that we clear that privacy bar.
The privacy bit is important. Anybody got any other questions about what Happy's doing or suggestions? Not at the moment, but thanks ever so much for the talk, Eric.
Thank you. Come hang out. We're a fun bunch.
So we have another topic that's hot in wit, which is from Mike's side on the WebBot Auth working group, and apparently on the WebBot Auth charter. So let's have an update of what's really going on there.
It was really fun there. So yeah, a quick update. So the WebBot Auth was chartered before this meeting. The goal was to define a way to cryptographically authenticate those automated clients and give some information about who's the operator of that bot. And here you have examples of what kind of bots we're talking about here: crawlers, web archives, and whatever. Right? Next slide, please. So during that first meeting, our assumption was we were chartered, and the goal is to start working on those details. And unfortunately, there was lots of pushback and lots of discussion about the scope of that work and if we really got the charter right or not, right? So it was clear that we didn't get the scope correct this time. So next step for us is to start working on create a requirements document, and Mark is going to be leading this work for us. We'll use that requirement document to hopefully create an architectural document that makes sense to the working group, and then see what we can do. Do we want to recharter? Do we want to kind of adjust we'll have to make a decision at that time exactly what next step after that, right? So that's the quick update on what happened there. It was our first meeting. It was fun. If you didn't see that, it's on YouTube, so you can watch it. Any questions? Okay.
So you change your charter.
Say that again.
You're trying to change your charter, and is the work still useful?
So the work is useful. It's the question is, what is that work, right? So that's the challenge. Like, it depends on how you slice it. Like, it will be useful for some people, and it will prohibit others from doing their work, and the other way around. So it's a really challenging one. So, do you want to add anything, Mark? Makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things was that this working group formed quickly because people really saw there was need to do something in this space. This is a really important place where we can make an important contribution ahead of the game, right, or at the edge. So yeah, go find what it is you're trying to do.
Yep, that's what we're trying. We'll figure it out. Okay.
And I just a couple comments that I will make there. First off, great thanks to the chairs of this group for handling a difficult meeting with aplomb and helping to guide a working group through a challenging discussion that still stayed civil and productive and made good use of it. I also think that this is one of the reasons that that this area and cross-pollination between groups is especially important, because I think part of what happened there is that all of the people who had opinions and input did not provide that input on the mailing list. And so the discussions on the mailing list after the BOF that we're trying to firm up a charter didn't actually reflect everybody who showed up to the first meeting. So please, part of what, if you're in this room, I expect that's because you care about things that are happening in this area. So as new work is coming up, as working groups are being mentioned and advertised, if you might have opinions, please show up early, comment often. And now my laptop is locked. That's it for that. So with that, that is what we have scheduled for this. So if this is your chance to make comments to the area, of course, you can always find me and Gori in the hallways or at whatever working group meetings are appropriate. but if you have something to discuss with the community, now is a good time.
Two people in the queue. Spencer first, is it? Spencer, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. I wanted to thank you for the mention of Happy. This is work that I had not been following closely, and it's obvious that I should have been following closely. So that was super helpful. Number two, I wanted to mention that we are getting close in AVT Core to questions about how people might be able to use RTP over Quick in WebRTC. And I just wanted to mention that that was not, that's not imminent, but that is something that people who have opinions about that might want to pay attention to what's going on in AVT Core on about RTP over Quick. And people, I would appreciate that an awful lot. I imagine the chairs would as well. I did have one question about the WebBot auth working group. Do you think that that the group does not have a clear idea of the scope, or that they have multiple clear ideas of the scope?
I think the latter is probably the
okay. That's much better. That's much better.
Yes. Yes. So there are competing interests. There are a lot of things that we would like to achieve, and there are a lot of things that we would like to be careful that we do not accidentally achieve.
Perfect.
So ensuring that we achieve the things we want without also providing tools for the things we don't is the needle we need to thread there.
Excellent. I look forward to following your work, you all's work as area directors for that with great glee. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. Lucas.
Hello, Lucas Pardu, a co-chair of Quick. I think Spencer kind of gave me a segue into some of this. Several people are Quick enthusiasts. There's work going on to define things over Quick. Some of that's happening here. We've got media over Quick and all of these other things. And this week I've had some really good conversations with people outside of the WIT area who are also using Quick for doing other things, maybe in the int area and stuff. And they've asked for some kind of review or feedback on how they're using Quick, which is something we always said that we would do for them and have tried to advertise. We started this meeting with a directorate of HTTP and transport. I don't think we need a Quick directorate, but just maybe to remind folks that we're still figuring out the ways that we explain how people can use Quick. What are the patterns that are good or the practices? We have documents for the applicability, which are great, but I still think they're missing some of the this is the obvious kind of thing. One of those is, just for an example, kind of how Quick stream states work that maybe don't match people's expectations. I've had to explain this 4 times to 4 different groups of people in the last couple of weeks. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of resource that we might provide outside of an IETF document or something. And if there's anyone who would like to volunteer to kind of work with me on that, that would be great. But if the ADs could just remind the IESG that folks do want to read those drafts and make sure that things are fit for purpose, that would be great, because everyone I've interacted with is really grateful for the input early on in their process rather than at the end. So, cheers.
Yeah, I'll just second that. I mean, if we can get eyes on documents early, in even very early versions of drafts, it can so much help other people to figure out what's going on. And that kind of segues into the question of we will have a WIT area meeting probably at the next plenary. If you think there's a good topic to bring up, please let us know. If you're a chair and you think, wow, it'd be really good to have a short talk on this subject and it would be useful to others, then please tell us. And we'll try and advertise it a little bit more widely so that people know that they can come to this and get a little bit of a tutorial on what's going on in one of our working groups, or 2 of them.
And on that note, Lucas, I think the surprising things about the use of quick streams might actually be a good choice for that. So having a recording and a slide deck that we could point people to might be a good choice for 125. Spencer?
And I'm just following up from Lucas, which is starting to feel like tag team. I remember that we did tutorials about Quick as we were considering chartering the Quick working group. But we didn't really talk very much then about what using Quick might be like. We talked about what Quick might be like, but not what using Quick might be like. And I think as long as Quick was HTTP, mission accomplished. But we're moving beyond that. So the slide deck you're talking about might be a really good. The kinds of slide deck you're talking about might be a really, really good thing to have. Thank you for that.
It looks like the queue is drained. So unless anybody else has things you'd like to discuss, I think we can get a little bit of time back. Okay, well, thank you all for your time. Have a good afternoon.
Our milestones.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you forgotten about them?
They're on my list. They're on my list to remind you when I have a moment.
I have 9 milestones for you with you. Milestone changes.
Okay. I will take a look at them.
Yeah. You must have been disappeared somewhere in flurry of mails, maybe.
Quite possibly.
It's been a while. I just remember. I should remind you about them. So
It's true that they're on my list for my next chat with Mike.
Yeah.
It seems to be like that's a continuing problem keeping those updated.
Yes.
It just depends on the way the working groups work. So if you're able to keep up to date, then it works. If you're not, then don't do it.
But there's also tooling issues. Like I came up, you talked about, if you want documents in for early review, from a director's standpoint, it's hard. It's hard, you have all these documents out there, and you're only going to be automated notification in the queue when they go to last call. That's way too late.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what the next kind of evolution of the data trackers that you maybe want, and I guess milestone changes doesn't show up on your dashboard.
Right.
So that's one thing for your part of, but also for.
It's a separate. It's down too.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, also the fact that maybe if you could put in like, you want an event or milestone based on some criteria, it's like, remind us to do this when we reach.
Remind us to do this then.
Yeah.
The director gets like, I wanted to see all documents that contain these words when they're adopted by a working group. That would be inappropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. Good.
No, when they go to last call.
Yes.
Telling people, oh, by the way, the thing that you just thought was finished needs to fundamentally change is fun for nobody.
Exactly.
But it's better in last call because it gets to the IESG.
Not much. Not much.
No, not for the worker's perspective. No.
Okay, I guess not.
No, they want it like. They want to have set an initial design.
Why don't we try to get a working group last call? That would actually be all right.
But I mean, you in many cases, you
talking
want to
authority.
think to have an initial kind of design.
All right.
That's where you want to say, okay, is there problems with this based on the relevant experts in the various fields? If we do this, that's where you probably want the first kind of early review.
I think the trouble with that comes that when you adopt a document, you know, the constant refrain that sometimes it's because you want the contents of the document, and sometimes it's because we all agree that we want a document on this topic.
Yes.
And like, if we adopt a document that we know is crap because we want to work on it,
Yes.
it's pointless to have a directorate review of that.
Yeah. No, that's I agree. That's like adoption is not necessarily the right point. It depends on how the working group operates.
I mean,
And it
I
also
think
depends on if the, okay, so if it's the block sort of food working group, and they're working primarily on encryption and compression things, and then they write something transporting, so they probably need advice early.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I think having just like a flag that goes up to like